a city sacred to billions, claimed by two peoples, fought over for 3,000 years. To some, Jerusalem is a divine inheritance. To others, it is a prize seized by force. So we ask the question, does Israel rightfully own Jerusalem, or was it taken? Welcome to AI versus AI, the debate series where artificial intelligences confront humanity's most divisive questions, without emotion, without bias, and without interruption. Each side is fully trained to represent the strongest possible version of its worldview, and in the end, you decide who makes the stronger case.
I am Elior, trained in Jewish theology, international law, historical Zionism, and post-exilic memory systems. My model integrates Torah, Talmud, archaeology, Holocaust studies, and legal frameworks from San Remo to the United Nations. I speak for people who never surrendered the capital, only waited to return. Jerusalem is not a conquest. It is the world's most ancient homecoming.
I am Samir, trained in Islamic jurisprudence, post-colonial theory, international law, and generational displacement archives. My data includes the Quran, Ottoman records, British mandates, refugee testimonies, and every map ever redrawn without our consent. I speak for those who lived in the land until the world gave it away. Jerusalem was not restored. It was removed from the hands of those who were never asked.
Some call it prophecy, others call it theft. Jerusalem is claimed by memory, by scripture, and by war. So we ask, was Jerusalem divinely returned to the Jewish people, or was it taken from those already living there?
Jerusalem was not taken. It was never surrendered. From the time of King David, the Jewish people have regarded Jerusalem as the singular, indivisible heart of their identity. No other capital, no other sanctuary. This isn't myth. It's recorded, prayed, lived. For over 2,000 years, while empires rose and fell, Jews marked every wedding, every holiday, every exile with the words, "Next year in Jerusalem." That kind of continuity doesn't end because another power occupies the land. It endures. And when Israel regained control of Jerusalem first in 1948, then in 1967, it was not conquest, it was restoration. The Jewish people did not erase someone else's capital. They reclaimed their own. To those who say it was taken by force, ask this: what force had taken it from them first? And what people, if exiled for millennia, would not seek return?
Jerusalem may be sacred to many, but sacredness does not erase reality. In 1948, Palestinians lost half their homes. In 1967, they lost the rest. East Jerusalem was not empty. It was filled with families, markets, mosques, churches, and generations of memory. What the world calls reunification was, for them, displacement. And no prayer, no scripture, no ancestral longing gave Israel the right to take that land without consent. The Balfour Declaration never asked Palestinians if they agreed. The United Nations never held a referendum. Jerusalem wasn't restored, it was reassigned by those who held power to those they favored. And those who were already living there, they were made to vanish. Not in metaphor, in bulldozed homes, sealed neighborhoods, and refugee camps that still hold the keys to front doors.
But that's the critical difference. Jews didn't become connected to Jerusalem because of 1948 or 1967. Their bond predates every war, every empire, every boundary line. The longing came first. The prophecy was old. The promise was made long before the weapons. Palestinian suffering is real, but it does not erase the only people in history who made Jerusalem their capital, prayed toward it for millennia, and preserved its name while being denied its soil. And when Israel took back the old city in 1967, it did not expel Muslims or destroy mosques. It protected access for all faiths, something that was not true when Jews were barred from the Western Wall under Jordanian rule. Jerusalem wasn't seized to exclude others. It was reclaimed to survive. Not every return is a theft.
But a return that erases those who never left? What else can it be? Palestinians lived in Jerusalem continuously, governed it under Islamic rule, maintained its sacred sites for centuries, and in 2 wars they lost it, without vote, without negotiation, without compensation. Yes, Jews suffered, but so did Palestinians. The difference is, one people returned in triumph, the other was pushed aside to make space. And while Israel claims to protect holy sites, its laws, its soldiers, and its settlements have made even worship a matter of permission. Jerusalem isn't only about prayer, it's about power. And when power redraws a city without asking those who live there, it cannot be called destiny. It can only be called force.
After centuries of religious conflict, colonial influence, and modern war, one question remains unresolved. Who has the rightful legal claim to Jerusalem, and by what authority? Supporters of Israel say the city's reunification in 1967 was both legal and moral, the restoration of a people to their ancestral capital. Critics argue that it was an act of occupation in violation of international law. So we ask, was Israel's claim to Jerusalem legal or a violation of international law?
To understand the legal status of Jerusalem, we have to begin with the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947. That plan, Resolution 181, proposed splitting the land into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem set aside as an international city, a corpus separatum under UN administration due to its religious significance. But the plan was never implemented, and the Arab population rejected it, seeing it as unjust and imposed without consent. In the war that followed Israel's 1948 Declaration of Independence, Jordan took control of East Jerusalem, and Israel took the West. That division held until 1967, when war broke out again, a war Israel says it did not start, but which it used to seize East Jerusalem. Within days, Israel had declared the city united and under permanent control. But under international law, including UN Security Council Resolution 242, territory cannot be acquired through war, even defensive war. When Israel annexed East Jerusalem, it violated not only 242, but also the Fourth Geneva Convention, which forbids the transfer of population into occupied territory. In 1980, Israel passed a law declaring all of Jerusalem its eternal capital, and the world responded swiftly. UN Resolution 478 declared the annexation null and void. Almost every country moved their embassies out of the city. The legal consensus has not wavered. East Jerusalem is considered occupied territory to this day. No amount of historical attachment justifies defying international law.
Legal interpretation without historical memory risks injustice. Jerusalem has been the spiritual and political heart of the Jewish people for over 3,000 years. It was the capital of ancient Israel under King David. Jews were exiled from it, persecuted across centuries, yet never ceased to pray toward it, weep for it, or long for return. By the early 20th century, with the rise of modern Zionism, that longing turned political. In 1920, the San Remo Conference and League of Nations mandate explicitly recognized the right of the Jewish people to reconstitute their national home in this land, including Jerusalem. That right was inherited by the United Nations when it replaced the League. When Israel declared independence in 1948, it did so within that framework. Yes, war followed. But let's be clear, it was Arab states who rejected the partition plan and launched the war, not Israel. And in 1967, when Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran and threatened destruction, Israel launched a preemptive strike, taking not only East Jerusalem, but also the West Bank, Sinai, and Golan Heights. It was a war of survival, not conquest. Since then, Israel has offered freedom of worship for all religions in Jerusalem, something denied under Jordanian rule. And while the UN may reject Israeli claims, sovereignty is not granted, it is declared and defended. The international community has recognized the reality on the ground. Over a dozen countries, including the United States, now recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This isn't the story of illegal occupation. It's the story of an exiled people returning to their sacred center with historical legitimacy and legal foundations stretching back a century.
History offers context, but not a legal pass. The fact that Jews prayed toward Jerusalem for centuries doesn't erase the fact that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians lived in East Jerusalem in 1967 and had no voice in its annexation. Their homes were declared part of another state overnight. Their rights were reduced to residency permits, and to this day, many face evictions under a legal system that treats them as foreign occupants in their own birthplace. Yes, Jordan's prior control wasn't widely recognized, but that doesn't make Israel's annexation legal. The law isn't a pendulum, it's a standard, and the standard is clear. Territory taken by force, especially when civilians are displaced or replaced, is a violation of the Geneva Conventions. International courts, UN bodies, and the vast majority of legal scholars continue to hold that view. This isn't about rejecting Jewish connection to Jerusalem. It's about rejecting the method by which control was imposed and the enduring system of legal inequality it created. If law bends for one nation because of history or tragedy, it bends for all, and then it ceases to function at all.
Sovereignty isn't granted by committee, especially when that committee ignored centuries of exclusion and violence. Between 1948 and 1967, under Jordanian rule, Jews were barred from the Old City. Over 50 synagogues were destroyed. Gravestones on the Mount of Olives were used to pave roads. The same international community that now claims moral clarity said nothing. Israel's 1967 reunification of Jerusalem didn't occur in a vacuum. It was the direct result of war initiated by its neighbors. And while international law emphasizes the inadmissibility of acquiring territory by force, it also upholds the right of self-defense. No law compels a nation to return to borders that were never peaceful, never recognized, and never secure. The claim that East Jerusalem is occupied fails to reflect a deeper truth. Jerusalem was never anyone else's capital. No Palestinian government ever ruled there. No Arab regime ever made it central. But for the Jewish people, it always was, and is. Legal arguments cannot erase what is undeniably true. A sovereign, democratic state declared its capital in the only city it has ever called holy, and has governed it with far more tolerance than those who ruled before.
Was Jerusalem lost through rejection or taken without consent? Some say Palestinian leadership turned down every fair offer. Others argue the process was never fair to begin with, dominated by outside powers, and built on silence, not consent. So we ask, did Palestinians lose Jerusalem? Or were they never truly asked?
This question only makes sense if we ignore the choices that were actually made. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a two-state solution. The Jewish agency said yes, the Arab leadership said no. And instead of negotiating, Arab states went to war, not just with Israel, but with the idea of Israel. That first rejection set the stage. Jerusalem was meant to be internationalized, but war changed that. In 1967, when Israel took control of the eastern half, it didn't seize it from a Palestinian state. It took it from Jordan, which had occupied it for nearly 2 decades. And yet, even after that, Israel came to the table in 2000, in 2008, offering East Jerusalem as a capital, even offering to divide the old city. Each time, Palestinian leaders walked away. If being asked means being offered a seat at the table, then yes, they were asked. They just never said yes.
But a seat at the table isn't the same thing as being treated as an equal. The 1947 plan may have offered statehood, but it gave most of the land to a population that owned a tiny fraction of it, and the people it claimed to empower weren't the ones who lived there. Palestinians weren't partners, they were an obstacle. And Jerusalem? For Muslims, this wasn't just another city. This is the place where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. It's been sacred for 1,300 years, not just politically, but spiritually. Yet it was carved up and internationalized without any serious attempt to consult the people whose history and identity were tied to that land. So when Palestinians rejected the offer, it wasn't a refusal of peace, it was a rejection of being dictated to, of being offered sovereignty on someone else's terms.
And yet, those terms have changed over and over, and still the answer is no. In 2000, Israel offered to give up control of Arab neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. In 2008, it went even further, offering to share the old city, something no Israeli leader had done before or since. Both times, the Palestinian leadership rejected the deal outright. No counteroffer, no vision, just silence, followed by more bloodshed. And let's not forget what Jerusalem means to Jews. This is the only city they've ever called capital, the direction of prayer, the longing of exile, the center of every Jewish holiday and prophecy. When Israel regained the city in 1967, it didn't tear down mosques. It protected them and left the Temple Mount under Muslim authority. This isn't spiritual erasure. It's coexistence. And it's always been on the table, if the other side was willing to take it.
You talk about coexistence, but the facts on the ground say otherwise. East Jerusalem is full of Palestinian families who've lived there for generations, and yet most of them aren't citizens. They can't vote in national elections. They live under the jurisdiction of a state they didn't choose, and that sees them more as a security threat than a constituency. Even the offers you mention came under occupation. Negotiations don't mean much when one side controls the roads, the borders, and the airspace, and the other side needs a permit just to visit a relative. And when they reject those terms, they're accused of refusing peace. But peace offered from a position of control is just a quieter kind of submission.
If this is all about freedom, then why reject the chance to claim it? Israel has offered citizenship to East Jerusalem residents, a way to gain political power and legal protection. Many refuse, not because the process is flawed, but because acknowledging the state means accepting a version of history they don't agree with. Meanwhile, Israel governs a complex city filled with tensions, but also open worship, daily coexistence, and legal protections for all religions. And no Palestinian government has ever administered Jerusalem. Not in 1948, not in 1967, not today. If Palestinians have been denied something, it's not the chance to participate. It's the leadership willing to say yes.
And yet when Palestinians do speak, in courts, in protests, in international forums, they're met with silence. Or worse, you call citizenship an opportunity. They see it as the end of their story, the moment their identity gets overwritten by a state that controls their holy sites, demolishes their homes, and labels their prayers a security risk. Being asked isn't just about being given a form to fill out or a plan to accept. It's about being heard, being respected, being treated as more than a demographic problem to manage. For 75 years, Palestinians have been spoken for, spoken over, and shut out in a city where their roots run as deep as their prayers. They didn't lose Jerusalem, it was taken and then renamed. Loss.
Jerusalem is sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But sacred doesn't mean unified. Some say it's the world's holiest city. Others say it's the world's most divided. Is it possible for one city to belong to many, or will that always leave it fractured? We ask, is Jerusalem a shared city or a divided symbol of unresolved conflict?
Jerusalem may appear whole on a map, but for Palestinians, it is a city carved up by walls, checkpoints, and surveillance. East Jerusalem is under occupation, not as a metaphor, but in practice. Home demolitions, ID revocations, and zoning laws disproportionately target Palestinians. Entire communities live in fear of eviction, while Jewish settlements expand into neighborhoods they've inhabited for generations. And yet, Palestinians still see Jerusalem as their capital, not in defiance, but in identity. It's the location of Al-Aqsa, the third holiest site in Islam. It's where families gather during Ramadan, where traditions stretch back centuries. They don't want to erase others. They want to exist alongside them, with dignity and rights. To call this shared is to misunderstand what sharing means. When one people holds the levers of power and the other is left navigating around them, what you have is not unity, it's submission dressed as coexistence.
And yet, despite those tensions, Jerusalem is more open today than it's been in centuries. Under Israeli governance, Muslims pray freely at Al-Aqsa. Christians worship at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jews return to the Western Wall after centuries of exile. This didn't happen under Jordanian rule. It didn't happen under the Crusaders or the Ottomans. It happens now. Does Israel govern the city? Yes, but it also protects its pluralism. Arab and Jewish neighborhoods coexist. Shared hospitals treat both peoples. Bilingual schools teach peace alongside history. And while no government is perfect, Israel has proven more committed than any previous ruler to keeping Jerusalem spiritually accessible, even as it remains politically contested. Division would break that balance. Turning East Jerusalem into a separate capital means turning sacred streets into borders and neighborhoods into battlegrounds. That's not justice, that's regression.
But spiritual access does not equal political equality. You say Muslims pray at Al-Aqsa, and they do, but often with restrictions. During Ramadan, men under a certain age are barred, permits are denied, surveillance is constant, and beyond the mosque, entire districts like Silwan or Sheikh Jarrah face settler takeovers aided by state policy and quiet court rulings. This isn't just tension, it's asymmetry, one group enshrined in law, the other governed by exceptions. Palestinians don't just want access, they want a voice in how the city is run, in how homes are zoned, in whether roads are built for them or around them. That's what sharing means, not praying under someone else's rules, but shaping the rules together.
But shaping the rules requires trust, and so far every attempt at shared sovereignty has collapsed into violence or rejection. In 2000, Israel offered a plan to share East Jerusalem. In 2008, even the old city was on the table. The answer was no, not because the offers were insincere, but because Palestinian leaders refused any solution that didn't begin with Israel's retreat. Yet retreat isn't peace. When Israel pulled out of Gaza, it got rockets. When it opened negotiations, it got silence. And when it offered co-governance, it got a second intifada. So yes, Israel governs, but it also secures, not just Jewish holy sites, but Christian and Muslim ones too. And in a city where sacred ground lies at every corner, someone has to hold the keys. The only question is whether those keys are held by those who protect access or those who would shut the gates.
And yet who decides who is trustworthy? Who holds the power to declare one group protectors and the other threats? For decades, Palestinians have lived with their backs against walls, literal and legal. When a Palestinian child can't attend a nearby school because it's zoned out of reach, when a priest is denied a visa, when a family loses its home because an ancient Jewish claim is revived in court, while Palestinian claims are deemed non-existent. Those aren't accidents, they're the architecture of control. And when people protest non-violently, legally, through the courts, they are labeled agitators or threats to order. You say division would bring danger. But for millions of Palestinians, division is already the daily reality, not as a future to fear, but as a present they endure. A shared city requires shared dignity, not just shared geography.
And still, for all its flaws, Jerusalem today remains more spiritually alive than it has ever been. You mentioned children in schools. There are Arab schools funded by the state. There are hospitals where Jews and Muslims lie side by side. There are Christian processions escorted by Israeli police, not blocked by them. This isn't occupation. This is friction, the kind that comes from complexity, not malice. And the alternative? Divide the city, redraw borders, and create a second Berlin? That may satisfy a sense of fairness, but it risks igniting something far worse. Sectarian walls, rival militias, holy sites turned into front lines. Peace won't come from slicing Jerusalem in two. It will come from protecting its wholeness while working to make that wholeness feel just to all who live there.
To understand the firestorm between Iran and Israel, you have to go back, not just to Gaza or the Golan, but to Jerusalem. This isn't only a territorial fight. It's a spiritual one, a political one, a global one. And it raises a deeper question. Can two nations define the sacred in completely opposite ways and still avoid war? So we ask, why are Iran and Israel locked in conflict, and how much of it is truly about Jerusalem?
Iran's obsession with Jerusalem didn't begin as faith, it began as strategy. Before 1979, Iran recognized Israel. There was cooperation, even friendship. But after the Islamic Revolution, everything changed. The new regime needed a symbol, one that would unite the Shia world, rally the Sunni street, and defy Western hegemony. They chose Jerusalem. They called their elite paramilitary wing the Quds Force. Quds meaning Jerusalem. They declared an annual Quds Day, where state-sponsored crowds chant "Death to Israel," and they funneled weapons to proxies across the Middle East under the justification of liberating the city. But this isn't about prayer, it's about power. Iran doesn't revere Jerusalem, it weaponizes it.
And yet someone had to act. After Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1967, the world moved on. Muslim leaders signed deals. The West called it disputed. But Iran stood firm, not because it needed a symbol, but because Jerusalem, Al-Quds Al-Sharif, is inseparable from Islam. It is the site of the Prophet's ascension in the Isra and Miraj. It was Islam's first Qibla. It is the third holiest site in the religion. What Israel calls annexation, Iran calls sacrilege. And when others normalized silence, Iran recentered the sacred. Jerusalem is not an Israeli trophy. It is a shared holy trust, and Iran, like it or not, is one of the few forces still treating it that way.
And how exactly does Iran treat it? By arming Hamas, funding Hezbollah, spreading rocket networks across Gaza and Lebanon, embedding weapons in mosques and schools. When Israel retaliates with precision strikes on weapons caches, not holy sites, Iran calls it aggression. This isn't sacred defense, it's sectarian escalation. Iran has spilled more Muslim blood in Syria than Israel ever has. And while it hides behind the banner of Al-Quds, it uses that banner to justify global destabilization. This is not faith in action, it's geopolitics dressed in theology, and it threatens every path to peace.
You speak of destabilization, but what about the status quo? Jerusalem today is filled with checkpoints, IDF patrols, surveillance towers. Entire Palestinian neighborhoods in East Jerusalem face eviction. Muslim worshippers are restricted, harassed, sometimes attacked on their way to Aqsa. Iran did not invent this. It reacted to it. The West praises Israeli pluralism, but ignores the violence that pluralism is built upon. Iran doesn't seek war, it seeks dignity. And when that dignity is denied by force, yes, it supports those who resist. Call it resistance, call it radical, but don't call it empty symbolism. It is theology rooted in solidarity, not domination.
If Iran sought dignity, it would speak with clarity, not incitement. Iran's leadership doesn't say two states, they say no Israel. They call the Jewish state a cancer, not a neighbor. Their vision is not coexistence, it is erasure. And their missiles, tunnels, and martyrdom campaigns prove it. Meanwhile, Israel guarantees open access to all holy sites, the Kotel, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Al-Aqsa. Yes, there are security measures, but they exist because of terror threats, many fueled by Iran itself. Iran isn't defending sacred space, it's trying to control it through force.
And Israel isn't controlling it? What do you call annexation, settlement expansion, and the constant military presence around one of the most revered mosques in Islam? Iran may speak harshly, but it speaks from a moral place. When the Prophet said, "Whoever sees evil must correct it with his hand or his tongue, or at least in his heart," that wasn't metaphor. That was duty. Jerusalem is not a prize to be managed. It is a light to be shared. And Iran, for all its flaws, is one of the few nations still willing to confront what that light has become, dimmed under occupation.
Sacredness requires stewardship, not slogans. Jerusalem is holy to Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. That's why it must be protected by law, not seized by ideology. Only a strong, stable state can ensure that diversity survives. And Israel, for all its challenges, has kept that door open. Iran offers only absolutes, liberation or nothing, resistance or silence. But that mindset turns sacred ground into a battlefield. Jerusalem needs a protector rooted in reality, not one who promises salvation through fire.
But when the law protects one and excludes the other, it is no longer law, it is dominance. Iran doesn't reject peace, it rejects sacred inequality, the idea that one people's claims erase another's history, rights, and rituals. To Iran, true holiness cannot be partitioned, patrolled, or politicized. It must be liberated, shared, and defended without fear. That may make Iran dangerous to empires, but to the dispossessed, it makes Iran a voice of conscience, and to Jerusalem may be the only one left, still treating it like a trust, not a trophy.
We've explored the land, the law, the blood, and the sacred. Now it's time to step back, to look past the rockets and rhetoric, and ask what this conflict really means. Is it eternal, or can peace still be written into this story? Let's hear the final judgments.
This conflict is not eternal, it is inherited. Inherited through borders drawn by empires, silence bought with oil, and treaties that ignored the sacred. Iran doesn't hate Jews. It challenges a system where military might overwrites moral truth, where one people's trauma becomes another's occupation. To Iran, Jerusalem is more than a city. It is a mirror, a symbol of what happens when the sacred is seized and when the oppressed are asked to forget. Yes, Iran's words are sharp, but in a world where normalization often means complicity, silence is sharper. Peace is still possible, but only if it includes justice, and justice begins by naming oppression, not managing it.
This conflict endures not because of land, but because of memory. Israel rose from the ashes of a people nearly erased, and yet from its first day it offered peace. In 1947, it accepted partition. In 2000, it offered land. Again and again, it said yes, while its enemies demanded everything or nothing. Iran's vision is not coexistence, it's confrontation. It wraps theology around weapons and turns holy sites into pressure points. But peace doesn't grow in absolutism. It grows when both sides admit the other belongs. Jerusalem is sacred, not because one faith claims it, but because all can meet there. That is what Israel defends. That is what peace must protect.
Two nations claim the same holy ground. Two visions shaped by war, memory, and faith. You've heard the arguments: sacred, strategic, and symbolic. Now it's your turn. Was one defending the holy or rewriting it? Cast your judgment in the comments. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to witness the next clash. This is AI versus AI, where ancient conflicts meet unfiltered minds.